it's human nature, isn't it, to want to blame someone when things go wrong? Well, that might explain why officials in Europe and the United States are pointing the finger at the debt ratings agencies. We've seen government after government scrambling to cut their spending and avoid the dreaded D word. That's default, by the way. Well, some say the ratings agencies are making a bad situation worse, but aren't the folks at Standard & Poor's, Fitch and Moody's just doing their job? Do they not have a legal and moral obligation to protect investors from bad debt? Well, that is the subject up for discussion tonight. And my guests are in New York tonight. David Widener is a journalist at the Wall Street Journal. And here in the studio with me, I'm joined by Jean-Michel Six. He's the chief European economist at the ratings agency Standard & Poor's. Philippe Darvizonnet is an associate professor of economics at the Sorbonne University here in Paris. And last but certainly not least, Sarah Bertin is managing director of sovereign advisory at Société Générale. And she also used to work for that other ratings agency, Moody's. And do remember, of course, you can, as always, participate in tonight's debate via Facebook. Just go to the France 24 debate page and let us know your thoughts. All those who work in the financial services industry, very welcome. All right, now let's start. I'm going to start with you, Jean-Michel, unsurprisingly. Let's start talking about the United States. Now, this is the world's biggest economy. It's never defaulted on its debts. It is the ultimate in safe havens. Why is your company considering a downgrade?
Our company has issued a negative outlook on the US some time ago on the basis of a number of considerations, political and economic. We were very concerned, we've been very concerned about the strength of the recovery in the US. We've been very concerned about the political divide in the US regarding the long-term debt trajectory and what needs to be done about it. And so we expressed some concerns that the administration and the Republican Party might not be able to reach a satisfactory compromise as far as how to correct that trajectory and get back to a sustainable path. That's where we are.
Now, you said that the US government would have to cut spending by $4 trillion in order to keep its AAA rating. It hasn't done that. It's going to make cuts of $2.4 trillion. Does that mean there will be a downgrade? Will it lose its AAA rating?
Well, we'll see. What we've said is that this number was the target. It was a ballpark, if you want. But we've also said that even if, which has not happened, but even if such a compromise was to take place, we would be looking for a political will and the political ability, not just the will, but the ability for both parties to actually implement the plan that would have been agreed upon. And so it's never a one-factor thing, if you want. We've never said, and we would never say in any circumstance, this is the number we want to see on paper, and based on that number, this is what you're going to get. There is a multiplicity of factors that we need to take into account. The number was kept by the press because it's a clear one, it's easy, but it's one of many factors that we would be considering.
All right, David Widener in New York, I'd like to bring you in on that. Hopefully you just heard what our guest from Standard & Poor's was saying there. What do you think about the ratings agencies on US debt at the moment?
On the US debt? Well, I think the message from the markets is clear in that they're largely ignoring threats of downgrades from U.S. ratings agencies. The spreads on the 10-year Treasury have fallen to really amazing lows. It's amazing that investors would consider accepting those kinds of returns, even with the default risk that the ratings agencies are talking about. So the market is clear. U.S. Treasuries are still a AAA product. They are still the safest security in the world. And the reality is that I mean, I'm not saying a downgrade wouldn't have an effect, but it remains to be seen whether or not even investors would shrug that off and sell U.S. debt as a result.
All right, investors are already ignoring the ratings agencies.
Can I just say that?
One at a time. Let's
quick
just.
point.
All right, quick
We're
point.
not basing any downgrade or upgrade, by the way, on spreads. So that's totally
But I think what
irrelevant.
David is saying is that the investors are not listening to your warnings about a downgrade because they're already pricing that in.
Which is fine.
To debt.
Which is fine.
Okay.
You have to. Sorry, ladies first.
Just 2 points. First of all, one question is still up to debate. Is AAA the best of the bunch, or is it the best, period. Like when a country is AAA, is it an absolute best or a relative best? From my time at rating agency, it's a question up to debate. The way the market reacts is completely different from the rating. It's always been. Investors bet on ratings. That's some of their job, but some investors do not follow the ratings. It's two different investing strategies. Okay. I don't know if you would agree.
All right, well, that's an interesting point. 17 countries, I think it is, right now have AAA ratings on their debt. I think we've got a graphic we can bring up for you. So 17 countries already have that AAA rating. So what you're saying is if the US lost its AAA rating, it would be less stable than, for example, Austria, Denmark, Finland. I mean, that doesn't necessarily follow, does it?
There are two comments. It has been said that rating agencies from time to time are so-called behind the curve. I think it's the case for the US. For the 3 years in a row, they have a fiscal deficit on top of 10%. Last year they announced, 2011, it will still be above 10%. Any other country would have had a warning 1 year ago. It just happens now in the US. We all knew that because there is a kind of consolidation in the private sector, household sector to begin with, growth wouldn't be that formidable in the US. All that was ignored, and suddenly, puff, everybody wakes up. So this is one point. The second point is it obvious to say that there is what the rating agency said is negligible because the spread on treasuries has come down. Who knows? By the same time, you have two kinds of attitudes of comments. One kind of attitude is, look at the ISM. It is telling, look at the revision of national accounts. It is telling us that growth in the US has been much more modest than we thought. It is telling us that growth won't be there. So it's a good case
so we can look at the economic data.
A downward orientation
right.
of the rates, whatever the rating agencies, because they are forecasting that the Fed will be more accommodative for longer. Together with that, suppose now it is downgraded to AA, whatever. But what is the substitute to the US debt market? So that's a protection.
But what about the point that when you've got these very heated, very sensitive, very emotive discussions going on in Washington, the ratings agencies are piling on the pressure. They're piling on additional pressure when there is already pressure, and that isn't their role. Are they going beyond their remit? Are they now too powerful?
You know, the rating agency, just one thing I would like to mention about the US. The rating agency, not all of them, but some of them, and in the press, for the last 3 weeks, we have heard about the debt ceiling. It's the 11th time it's happening in the US. It's been much worse than that. At some point...
But it's the first time we've had a threat of a downgrade on the US.
Yes. What happens the other 11th time?
It was not linked on the debt ceiling, by the way.
But it's been portrayed like that. I've been hearing about the debt ceiling for the last 3 weeks, which is not the issue. So, first of all, I just would like to clear that. I think the timing of some of the rating agencies...
What about the question about them being too powerful now, though?
Rating agencies have been around for more than 100 years. They did not always have that power. The first regulation that included rating is in 1931. The SEC included rating in its regulation in the 70s, in 1975. Since then, everybody uses rating. The ECB, European Central Bank, has rating to decide what it accepts or doesn't accept as a collateral. It's the ECB. The ECB should be able to assess the risk of sovereign borrowers. It doesn't have to be rating agencies. So the rating agencies, the way they do their work is one issue. The way that work is used by the rest of the market, by investors, by regulators, by banks, is another issue. And I think you have to divide both of them.
All right, I'll put it to you then, Jean-Michel Six. So when we had these discussions going on in Washington, and the ratings agencies, in terms of timing, they were threatening to downgrade the United States while the discussions were ongoing. My question is whether you think that might have had some kind of impact on the democratic process.
Well, first of all, we expressed an opinion a little while before the actual negotiations around the debt ceiling became very heated. Second, the reason why the debt ceiling appeared to be such a big deal is because, not so much because it needed to be raised, it had to be raised anyway, but because the compromise that had to be passed with the Republican Party, between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, was such that it was going to address the longer term issues around the debt. The debt ceiling itself is no big deal. What was a big deal is what are you going to agree upon in order for that debt ceiling to be raised.
The debt ceiling necessitated a debate on how much to cut over the next 10 years, didn't
That's
it?
Right.
That was why they were having the debate.
That's why we had to communicate our own opinion as to how much we thought needed to be cut.
All right, David Wyden, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I think the problem is not necessarily with the ratings agencies themselves. They have their own problems, but I think part of the problem is that they are still the only game in town. They are the only place to go to. They are still hugely influential in not only how sovereigns are priced, but all securities, both private and public, how they're priced as well. So this is one of the lessons that we really did not take to heart after the financial crisis, is that these are wrong.
All right.
We were serious problems in the marketplace.
Oh, just make that point again for us, David, because we were having very poor sound quality there at the end.
You weren't able to hear?
Just quickly.
The final point.
Just the final point.
Well, just that it's one of the legacies of the financial crisis that we have not addressed, in that these ratings agencies are too powerful, and that they, when they do make a mistake or when they do move the wrong way, and it doesn't need to be much, they can really throw a wrench into the global economy.
Okay,
Just one point, I would like to, one question and one point. When we say they move the wrong way, rating agency assess risk. Risk can never be accessed by certainty. When I say tomorrow there is a 75% chance of rain, if tomorrow it doesn't rain, does it mean that I was wrong? Or it was a 25% chance of no rain? So also you have to be kind of careful.
There's no wrong way.
On our assessment of risk. And I think financial market and our society in general believes that it's because you measure risk and because you are able to insure yourself against risk that risks just disappear. No, the risk remain.
Okay,
so that's the first thing. The second thing that I would like to ask you is when you say we decided as a rating agency that the amount that had to be cut was not enough, was not significant, was not appropriate. How did you make that estimate? With data, with how many people? Who did you communicate those estimates with? Who did you talk to when you met them?
Well, first of all, we did not. I don't think, unless I'm wrong, that we communicated that this amount was not enough. The amount that was agreed upon. We gave an amount initially, as I said, a ballpark to illustrate the magnitude of the effort that needed to be done. There are many ways to get to that number. You can cut taxes, you can cut expenditures, you can do both. But so there's more than one path to
reach the 4 trillion, the golden number, right?
This number. How did we do that? Well, we have obviously a number of models. We consult on an ongoing basis with all the international organizations and with the U.S. Treasury, with the OMB. I mean, this is an ongoing effort that we've been doing now for over 40 years. This is not an exercise that we carry, believe me, on the back of an envelope. This is a huge responsibility that we have, and we know very well that any communication that we have will have an impact, which is precisely why, if you look at our website and you see what have we said when regarding the discussions in Washington, you will see that we issued a press release accompanying this negative outlook thing a while before, over 2 months or so before the actual...
But there were comments around the time
and
of
then
the debate.
we did not comment during the negotiation. You will not see any communication from S&P on that.
Do you not think there's an additional pressure on US lawmakers to avoid. No one wants to be the president of the United States during a time when the economy is downgraded from a AAA rating it's had since the beginning of time. So that is always going to be foremost in lawmakers' minds, when actually perhaps they should be thinking more about the people who elected them and how best to serve them.
Now, turn your question around. Would you imagine for a second that rating agencies, or let's say Standard & Poor's, would issue the opposite statement saying, we fully understand that the President of the United States would not like to have his AAA rating downgraded. Therefore, we've decided to suspend any communication on this one for the time being until things get better. I mean, this is our job. Our job is to assess the risks at any point in time. But again, we have not overwhelmed the markets with communications about the US during the negotiations. We made a statement early on, and you have not found anything else since then. So we were not like on a daily basis barking, after that tree and saying, you got to do something, you got to do something. We just communicated our opinion as to the magnitude. We wanted to insist on the fact that the magnitude of the effort that needs to be done fiscally in the US is very significant.
Okay.
That's all we said.
All right, let's talk about Europe, because US officials have only been criticising ratings agencies since this whole debate began. But in Europe, there has been a lot of very fierce criticism that the ratings agencies are aggravating a problem, that they're attacking peripheral countries in the Eurozone, Portugal, Greece, Ireland. Their downgrades are not related to any specific events, and they are making it very, very difficult for these economies to balance their books, borrow money, and get out of debt. How would you respond to Jose Manuel Barroso, for example, in his comments this week?
Well, I'm not going to respond to Mr. Barroso directly, but what I want to say is you need to take some specific examples. Because, for instance, you said you were...
Okay, Portugal. Let's talk about Portugal.
Yeah, but I was going to say, if you talk about the small guys, okay, because you read that in the popular press, you guys are after the little guys, not after the big guys. Well, first of all, we just talked about the US. That's a big guy, all right. Now, we also had a negative outlook on the UK last year, okay? That's a AAA, and that's a negative outlook that we have now moved back to stable. So it's not a fate. Second, as far as Portugal is concerned, and this, don't confuse us with Moody's, but as far as Portugal is concerned, when the July plan was approved in Brussels regarding the way debt was going to be restructured in Greece, there were lots of good things in that plan, but there's one very, very important thing, which is totally new, which is it created the precedent for the first time since 1948 in Western Europe. A sovereign was going to default, a partial default, selective default on its sovereign debt. That creates a precedent. In other words, you said, after Brussels, we said, okay, well, Brussels, the agreement, the heads of states agreement says, well, if a country needs some help, we can provide that help, but it's conditional on the private sector involvement. No judgment on that, just an observation. That means that the next time another country may need help, they may have also to restructure.
All right, Jean-Michel,
that's all we said.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to hold that thought for one moment. We're going to have to take a very short break. We'll be back with the headlines and the rest of tonight's debate. Don't go away.